everyone has a different mindset as to what financial success is. There's always someone else out there that has more than you and is doing more than you. And if you try and keep up with them, you might be left behind. Think about your environment. Think about who you're spending your time with. Who are you trying to keep up with? I think some stress just comes up when you're in a certain social situation where your friends are in different places than you're at and you're trying to keep up with them.
Ryan McKeown is a Senior Vice President and a Financial Advisor at the Wealth Enhancement Group. Now, I'm really excited to talk about finances with Ryan because he has a lot of wisdom and advice. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal article, How Seniors Could Do Smart Roth IRA Conversions. He was also featured in Minneapolis St. Paul magazine as well as the Twin Cities Business magazine. So this man has a lot of credibility, and he's going to sit with us and teach us a little bit about how you can manage your finances and what you could do different to help you up for financial success.
I find a lot of stress around money comes around things that you can't control. If you base your self-worth off of your money, you're never going to be free. You're always going to be chasing the next thing. Some of the most successful people that I know, they don't get caught up in money. They get caught up in the next idea. You know, the wealthiest person that's ever came to my office drove up in a 1990s Geo Metro that had duct tape on the windows.
Really? Huh.
Mm-hmm. That's when you're truly wealthy, is when you don't care what other people think.
Do you think anybody could be successful if they take the right steps?
I think anyone can be successful if they take the right steps with not just managing their money, but having the right mentality about it.
What's the mentality?
Well, the mentality is...
All right, Ryan, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. I am pumped to be here.
Okay, wonderful, Ryan. We're excited to have you as well. So today we're going to be talking about money, concept of money, ideas of money, and how you could kind of be better at finances. But before we go into that, you're a financial advisor at Wealth Enhancement Group, so you kind of have the knowledge and expertise. How would you say your start with money? Like, how did you start? What was your concept of money? Was it a positive? Was it a negative? Can you kind of walk us through?
Well, growing up, you know, my formative years and how it related to money, I think it was a little different than others. I grew up, my mom died of cancer when I was 10. It was my dad, and he's a single parent, and raising myself and my brother, and we really didn't have a lot of resources, but we never went without, and we just figured out how to make things work. And there's probably some struggles that I didn't realize. I didn't really think anything of it because I felt like we were kind of in our little bubble, and I didn't notice anything really different about us versus other families.
Did you feel like growing up, kind of seeing the concepts around money with your family, did you feel like you were ever at a lack, or did you not even notice that?
Well, I think the focus on money growing up was more about how do we get from this month to next month. It really wasn't about saving and other concepts. Certainly, it was. There's a lot of ideas around we don't need to spend money on fancy things to be happy, which I think in this day and age, we're just throttled with all of these ads on social media and so forth. And you get on TikTok and everyone's got the latest new thing, and those things all cost money. It's
hard not to buy it. I'm one of those victims that I see something on TikTok shop. I'm like, oh, I will get that.
Yeah, that's what they're counting on.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think that's really set in with me. It's just being happy without having to do a lot of fancy stuff. Like growing up, I never went to Disney World, but we'd go on road trips to go to baseball games. My dad worked in manufacturing, and he worked 4 days a week. And so he'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. And during the summers, he had these Volkswagen vans with a pop-up camper, and it was just kind of fun, the fun vehicles to be in. And we'd wake up Friday morning and he'd say, "Hey, Cubs are playing at Wrigley Field. Let's go see the Cubs play." And we'd just hop in the Volkswagen and, camp out, and wouldn't get a hotel room. We'd get standing room tickets at Wrigley Field. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And so growing up, and even to this day, I feel very content with not, I find fun and joy in the simple things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's helped me stay in my lane as I have become more aware about finances and saving and feeling more secure and putting myself in that position of being more secure for my own financial future.
I feel like conversation about money, people think it's like a bit taboo. You know, they don't want to really get into that. Do you feel like it should be a topic of conversation amongst people?
I think so, but it's kind of like politics in a way. You have to know the lines to draw and realize everyone's going to make their own decisions about things. And whatever decision they make, that's their decision. That's not yours. Everyone has different values. Some people might really value road trips to baseball games. Some people really might like to go to Disney, but is it your place to make that, it's just like, well, you sure you should be doing that?
Yeah.
Well, no, that's up to them. And there's a trade-off with everything. And when clients come to me and say, hey, can I afford to do something? And my first response is there's trade-offs. We've run the numbers and we've said, this is how much money you can spend every year during retirement or, whatever it is. Or we know this is how much you have left over after paying your bills. And if you spend this money on XYZ, you can't do ABC.
Do you think anybody could be successful if they take the right steps with money?
I think anyone can be successful if they take the right steps with not just managing their money, but having the right mentality about it.
What's the mentality?
Well, the mentality is staying in your lane and being able to feel happy without doing things that spend money, that you have to spend money on. And that can be hard to do because it seems like everything nowadays.
Like traveling, like that's a source of happiness, but might be a little pricey on the...
Well, but think about it. Like, I just explained how we, drive to Chicago in a Volkswagen van and get standing room tickets at a, Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
It's like, you can be happy traveling, doing those kinds of things. Or heck, even if you flew to like New York City and you stayed in downtown New York, how much free stuff is there to do in New York City? Right? I mean, you can go to Central Park. You can walk along. Just walking through the city and appreciating that.
It sounds like you're saying that you should kind of be happy with the present moment in a sense, with what you have, versus dreaming about what you will once have. There's always someone else out there that has more than you and is doing more than you. And if you try and keep up with them, you might be left behind. Yeah, comparison is a joy killer, right? When did you have that shift? Kind of like you're living month to month in a sense. When did you decide, you know what, I am not going to live this way anymore?
Well, it started when I started in college. My goal was to come out of college debt free, and so I worked full time. Went to college. When I went to college at Mankato State University, Minnesota State University Mankato, as we call it now, I was a community advisor in the dorms, so I got my room and board paid for. I was just trying to think of these ways that I could be smart about approaching my education, and I actually ended up not just coming out of college without debt. I saved money. I was working at peak times when my friends were going out. I would purposely work on Friday and Saturday nights delivering pizzas.
Wow!
So that way I wouldn't be spending money. Now that being, I've been a musician for 35 years, so we did have a band in college. So that we play once a month, and that was my time to shine.
Yeah. Well, does that get tough? Because if you're always thinking about money and like, oh, I need to save here, like you kind of tend to give up on a lot of things, like going out with your friends and stuff like that. What's your advice for somebody that's kind of fearful of, focusing on money? So
think about if you go out with friends every Friday night. Doesn't it just become normal?
Yeah.
And you take it for granted? When my band played once a month, it's like, this is great. Like I didn't take, you find to not take those things for granted as much, to become more special.
Okay.
I remember I had a friend that lived in Colorado near a ski resort for a couple of years, and I'd go try and visit, and hey, a free place to stay, and we'll go ski and stuff, and I could just tell they totally took for granted that they lived near a ski resort. Where I'm coming from Minnesota, where well, the skiing's, I love Mount Cato. It's a great place. I'm so glad we have it in our community, but it's not the same as skiing on a mountain.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, yeah, it's a little windy out today. I could just like take it, it wasn't as special to them anymore. But when they lived in Minnesota, like, oh my gosh, all I can think about is skiing in the mountains. And, if you do it all the time, Where's the joy in that?
Do you feel like the average person is always seeking more and more and more?
It's human nature.
Because I'm sure that you've had a few clients. You've been a financial advisor for 20 years now? Like, you've probably seen it. What has been the biggest lesson you have learned?
Boy, you got to narrow it down to one. Maybe rephrasing the question, what's one lesson I've learned?
Yeah.
Trying to narrow it down to one. It's stay in your lane.
That's the biggest piece of advice?
Absolutely. And don't put too much money in real estate.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that I see is the cost of real estate and what a cash sucker it is. And that's a very personal thing to bring up here because it's your home. It's where you live. You want it to be nice. You want it to, you want to feel cozy and so forth. But you think about it, for every $100,000 of house value, it probably takes about 5% of that value, or $5,000, to operate it. So, if you have a $500,000 house, you better plan on $25,000 a year. That's just in keeping it up. That's not the mortgage and interest. That's just keeping it up. So, and there's always something that you can do to the house that costs money, remodeling, doing this, doing that you would never think about if you were renting an apartment. So it's not just the cost of the house. It's all I call them might as well expenditures. Well, you start doing a little, project around the house. Like, we're doing this. We might as well do that. And before you know it, you've sunk a lot of money into something that you can't get back. It's not liquid. If you run into an emergency, unless you sell your house or take more debt on it, the money you just sunk into your house, you can't get that money back. And if you ever do run into financial hardships, the lower you can keep your fixed expenses, the better you're going to feel about things. I see so many people that just live to pay for their house.
Really?
But they're working so much they don't get to enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a good concept.
and that's not. I mean, we that's a big topic in the news right now, is the cost of living.
Yeah.
Well, I would say perhaps expectations need to change too. If you want the biggest, nicest house, well, there's trade-offs with that. Just like how I explained earlier. You can do ABC or XYZ, but if you do XYZ, you can't do ABC. There's trade-offs. I mean, if you want to have a nicer house, you just got to be willing to sink that much more into it. And does that take away from the other things you might want to be doing with your friends or family? You think about the difference between a $300,000 house and a $500,000 house. That's $10,000 a year in operating expenses. Using my 5% rule, where it takes $5,000 for every $100,000 of house to maintain it, a $200,000 difference is $10,000 a year just to run the place. Probably go on a couple of trips for that.
Yeah.
And if travel is more important to you, or maybe that's tuition for, you want your child to go to a certain school or be able to afford athletic, opportunities or whatever it might be. It all takes away from that.
Can I ask you, Ryan? You were kind of talking about you went into college and you were trying to be debt-free coming out of it. Let's say there's somebody that, wasn't thinking about it at that time. You know what I'm saying? And it's coming out of college and they have loans and they're living paycheck to paycheck. Do you think there's a way for them to get out of it? Like, is there a possibility?
Yeah. You have to, anytime you overconsume, you have to underconsume dramatically. And that's really hard to do. If you're a recent college graduate, it's hard because you've got friends, you're starting off in life, you want to build that social circle, and it's hard not to go out and have coffee or go out to dinner with friends. It's, you want your own place, but, chances, you probably should just share a place with, 3 other people as long as you possibly can.
Gotcha.
Because you don't want to be a slave to your student loans forever. And yeah, you could look back and say, gosh, I wish I would have went to a different school or made different decisions. Well, you can't keep looking back. You got to figure, this is where you're at now, and you got to figure it out. And the more changes you can make to underspend so you can get out of that situation, the faster you're going to be able to move forward.
I love what you said about being a slave to student loans. And I feel like a lot of people would say they kind of feel like a slave to their loans or debts and things like that. And they're probably so discouraged and just feel like there's no hope or no way of, building that wealth over time. And what is your advice for them, what would you say they should do?
Be aware of where your money's going.
What do you mean by that?
So, and I don't mean by budgeting, because I feel like nobody wants to budget.
I did want to ask you about that later, but yeah.
I'm not a big proponent of budgeting. I'm a big proponent of tracking. I don't have a budget myself, but I track because I want to be aware of where my money's going. Because some things you just can't help. If you have a car repair or things like that, well, okay, you can't budget for when your car is going to need a repair sometimes. But if you can track where your money's going and be aware, hey, wow, I spent a lot of money going out to eat. That's got to change. Now you're thinking about the behavior of what you're spending your money on. And I think that's more important than the actual like budgeting process itself. So I mean, it helps to kind of write down what you have coming in, what you have going out. But then as you track, hey, is this more or less than what I expected?
How do you track? What do you do? Do you write down everything you've shopped on and every gas station you went to, you write it down, or how do you do that?
So, I'm a CPA. I have a QuickBooks program. I export my bank transactions in every month, and I just kind of classify things. Behavior, because there's a lot of apps that I think, like Quicken and I'm trying to think of a couple other ones, but
Rocket Money. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'll tell you where it's going, but it automatically spits it in there for you. And for me, because I have to physically categorize my spending, it's the act of me being aware of that. If it automatically shows up for you, it doesn't give you that same level of awareness. It's almost like trying to complete a workout plan without doing the workout itself.
Interesting.
So that's what I do every month is I download all my transactions into QuickBooks. I've had some clients use Excel, where it's pretty easy nowadays to download your transactions into a spreadsheet and sort things out and then kind of like, oh wow, I didn't realize I spent that much going out and doing this or that and so forth.
As a financial advisor, I'm sure you've met a lot of financially successful people. What would you say their habits are?
Staying in their lane.
That's a big one. That's on theme.
Staying in their lane and never losing that sense of urgency from when they started. Because, I'm a small business owner, and I know many small business owners. They never forget when they first started, or even if you're not a small business owner, you think about how challenging it was when you were first starting out in life. And if you get complacent and lose sight of that, you're not going to have that sense of urgency and self-control to make smart decisions.
Interesting. So, okay, let's start with me. Okay, I've learned to start tracking what is coming in. I'm writing it down. I'm organizing it. What do I do with that money that's coming in extra? Do I save it? Do I invest it? What happens?
Sure, absolutely. So, I would say how to allocate, your resources, and we'll say it's after your expenses.
Okay.
Because after your bills are paid, what's your, how much do you have left over for different things, and so I think investing versus saving is probably the smartest way. But then there's different kinds of accounts where you can invest, but if you need the money, you can still access it.
Oh, okay.
So like a Roth IRA, I think is a great thing for someone in their 20s to be able to invest for their long-term retirement, yet still have the ability to access it if they need to. Right now, this year, you can put $7,000 into a Roth IRA. It's $8,000 if you're age 50 or older. But none of us are 50 or older here, right? So we still get carded. But you can always take out your contributions at any time without any taxes.
I'm going to listen back to this podcast every day just to remember everything you said.
That's great. That's great. I'll just be, you'll fall asleep and you'll be hearing my voice, Roth IRA. No,
because it's really cool to hear. There's always so much financial information being thrown your way and you don't know what the right step is, you don't know what to listen to, what not to listen to. So I'm grateful that you're here to teach us.
Well, I think a lot of people that are just starting out, they're conflicted. Like they want to have access to money, but at the same time, they need to be thinking long term as well. And so a lot of people don't understand a Roth IRA has that level of flexibility where hopefully you can keep that money in there for the long term, because long term, the Roth IRA grows tax free, and all the earnings are tax free if you leave it alone until age 59 and a half. But now, just caveat, so for people who listen to this, you can only take out what you put in tax free. If you take out more than what you put in, so let's say you put $7,000 in and you invested it, and it's up to $8,000, you can take out that first $7,000 without any taxes, but that other $1,000 that your portfolio has grown to, or the account's grown to, that if you take that out, that's taxable plus a 10% penalty.
Can I ask you a silly question? But okay, after retirement, can you take out all that money without the taxes?
Yeah, after age 59 and a half, tax free.
Huh, interesting. For some people that are not aware of how like a Roth IRA works or 401k kind of thing, what is your advice? How can people get more knowledge on that?
Sure. Well, I think there's so much information out there, which is
So much.
kind of a blessing and a curse. I think talk to your parents. Ask them what they did
Okay.
and how they approach savings. I find that a lot of financial advisors like myself will visit with our clients' children. That's a service
That's something I've never heard of before.
That's a service that a lot of financial advisors will do. It may not make sense for someone just starting out to hire a financial advisor, but most of us will take half an hour to an hour to just look through where you're at and give you some basic things, because you only need to do some basic things when you're just starting out, and if you do those basic things right and they work out, then you'll have more complicated things to talk about later on, like how do you actually take the money out and how much should you take out and taxes and all the other stuff that goes along with it.
Okay, what would be kind of your advice for somebody that has only one job and is kind of working paycheck to paycheck and has debt in a sense?
So someone working paycheck to paycheck that has debt, and I've got to be cautious not to come off the wrong way, but you got to get a second job.
Second job. Okay.
I mean, that's tough because that means giving up your time, but also the less time that you're not working, you're also not spending money either.
Huh.
So some of the things that may be creating the debt, you have less ability to do those activities that create the debt. It's kind of a twofold thing. When I first got out of college and started my career as a financial advisor, it's tough to get going in anything. And so I delivered pizzas Fridays and Saturday nights. Twofold. One, I got a free pizza at the end of the night. That
Free
was
dinner.
awesome. That was awesome. But second, I was making money instead of spending it. When my friends were out spending, back in the day, I'm aging myself here. I do have some gray hair. You'd spend, $40 or $50 going out, which is probably like $100 now. Doesn't take much to rack up bills with inflation and things happening. But, I'd be making $100 or $200 in tips, delivering pizzas in a night versus spending money. I was going back. It was a complete 180 and swinging. Mm-hmm. So that put me in the position of kind of forced savings. But I was not just saving, I was earning.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I hear it loud and clear, but what about somebody that's like, I just can't give that up. I can't give up going out for coffees with friends. I can't give up, going out at times. Like, that's how I network. That's how I meet people. What would you say? You're on your own?
There's different ways to approach it. Just because you're out doesn't, look for times where things are on deals. There's, get the apps. There's lots of deals on the apps and those kinds of things. But yeah, for the most part, you got to make choices.
Have you felt more secure now being kind of responsible for your own finances than you were when you were living with your father?
I do, but at the same time, there's this little voice in the back of me that remembers how hard it was starting out. And I never want to go back to that spot. And I think everyone's life experience is a little different. People that were born between, around 2000 and they've gone through 9/11 and the financial crisis and COVID. It's very similar to people that were born in the 1930s and they went through the Great Depression. And I see that with my clients that are baby boomers. Maybe they were born in 1950, but their parents were born in the 30s. And, those parents had they remember how tough the Great Depression was, and that behavior carried over into how they raised their kids, and their kids gained those habits. And the further we got away from the Great Depression, we started to forget those things. Mm-hmm. And so now I think it's coming a little bit full circle with people who have experienced some hardships financially through various world events, but they didn't have TikTok before. With all the tempting in the 1930s, you had radio and just one or two stations and maybe an occasional advertisement that encouraged you to buy a very simple consumer product like shampoo, or something. It's not there wasn't the latest fashion trends or things like that, whatever the thing is at the moment.
I'm going to be very vulnerable here. My mom was an immigrant, so she came here maybe 1990s, early 2000s. So I kind of grew up on the concept of, you got to eat the whole plate, you got to finish everything, like every little piece. And those kind of ideas stick with you about money, and money doesn't grow on trees, and those concepts. Are those healthy ideas? Is this going to help my financial growth if I keep thinking like, oh, I got to save every penny and do this and do that?
So by having that mentality where you feel like you got to save every penny, that's a way better, that puts you in a way better position than the other way.
Oh, okay.
You got, I mean, in some ways you can go overboard. I think there's a TV show about the world's biggest cheapskates where I remember a guy would, they'd go out to eat in a restaurant, but he'd see leftovers from other people and he'd ask, hey, can I take your leftovers home?
No. Okay.
That's going a little extreme.
Yeah.
So as with everything, it's finding a balance. But if I'd rather balance to where I'm saving everything, and at least that gives me options. If I run into something financially, I'm going to have choices. Mm-hmm. And then I'm putting thought behind my decision making versus lots of small little choices that, getting coffee, going out and getting coffee every day, or going out for drinks every night, or whatever it is that that all adds up.
What is your
$5 of coffee a day is $150 a month.
Ooh. I didn't need the math on that one. I spent a lot on coffee. What is your take on credit cards? I was watching this financial podcast, and the guest that was speaking had said something along the lines of, you're 25% or something along that line. You're 25% more inclined to swipe your credit card than you are like your debit card. Is that true? What is your take on that?
I think they're still swiping. And who swipes anymore? Don't you use Apple Pay or Google
Ding.
Pay?
Okay, dinging.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see how that's evolved, because it used to be that swiping credit cards was a lot different. For me, cash is actually easier to spend for me now, because once the cash is out of my bank account, it's like that's out of my bank account. I can't see it. I can spend it freely. Whereas I think about it more if I have to actually, it's still in my account, and do I want it to come out of my account or not?
Gotcha. So do you recommend credit cards? What is your take on that?
I think credit cards can be the best tool ever, but they can be the worst ever either. And I'm going way back to I got finance and accounting degrees from Minnesota State University, Mankato, and the great Dr. Harry Thews drove this into me, that credit cards can be your best friend or your worst nightmare. Mm-hmm. I think credit cards are great from a security perspective, and they give you 30 days to float expenses. I think it simplifies things so that you can see all of your spending on one statement instead of everything kind of being randomized all in one spot. And points. It's like you're getting paid for spending money. Now you can rationalize, hey, I'm going to pick up the check for my friends at dinner because I'm getting the points. Oh. Well, make sure you're getting the Venmo for their share afterwards, of course. But and so there's so many benefits of it. I recommend clients use credit cards instead of debit cards, because what if there's fraudulent transactions? You have 30 days to check it out before it leaves your account. If your debit card is compromised, that money's leaving your bank account.
It's gone, yeah.
Yeah, and but then it can be your worst nightmare if you don't pay it off and you carry a balance. It's a very, very hefty cost.
Yeah. I want to kind of backtrack, not to budgeting, but along those lines of tracking. So I feel like looking through your statements might be a little bit overwhelming. Is there a specific time frame that you track? Like, do you do it bi-weekly? Do you do it once a month? What is your recommendation?
I do it once a month, because that usually gives you a gauge. Most people think about how much do I earn every month? How much is my rent every month, or my mortgage payment? How much are my groceries every month? People's brains really think on a monthly basis. I feel like that's the most common. I find a lot of financial planning software looks at things on an annual basis, though. And I think that can be kind of overwhelming if you think about all the things that you do in a given year. I find monthly is it gives you a big enough look at your finances to see if there are trends or patterns, because one week to the next things could change quite a bit, but over the course of a month over month, I think you can find some patterns in terms of your spending and habits and where your money's going.
Wonderful. I do have to ask, do you believe as a financial advisor that being broke is a choice?
Being broke is a choice.
And I put that in quotations. Broke.
Let's put a disclaimer behind that there too. So being broke is a behavior. I don't know if it's a choice, it's a behavior.
Can you expand on that?
Thinking about from a behavioral perspective, it's really, if we're used to certain habits, it's the habits and the behaviors that cause us to be broke. And sometimes it's just embedded in you. If you grew up in a very privileged lifestyle and now you're on your own and you're used to those privileged things, and now your income doesn't allow you to do those privileged things, and you're off the bank of mom and dad are not banking you anymore.
Yeah.
It's very hard to change those behaviors that have been embedded in you for so long, thinking, oh yeah, no big deal. Let's go do this, do that. Things you didn't think about growing up because you knew your family had the resources to do that. It's an embedded behavior. It doesn't feel like a choice, even though you are making choices, to do that behavior or not.
What if those things you're buying is giving you a little bit of joy and happiness within the week?
Well,
like a coffee a week, I'm like, yay, I have something to look forward to.
Well, it's you got to stay in your lane, and there's cheaper ways. There's cheaper ways to get coffee than Starbucks.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, I even think about at my own office. I looked at how much I was spending on K-Cups.
Oh.
And I decided we're spending a lot of money on K-Cups, but I really like coffee, and I want to get good coffee. So we got the reusable K-Cups, but then I get a pound of really good coffee. And then when I looked at it, the K-Cups versus the reusable ones, we were still saving money, and I was drinking better coffee. No offense to the K-Cup makers, but it's not strong enough. I can make it as strong as I want with my reusable K-Cups.
Gotcha. So, okay, a person is keeping track of their income, keeping track of what they're spending on. They have multiple streams of income. They got the second job. They're putting their money in retirement. They're putting their money in some sort of investment. Are they on the right track to financial success?
That's a person by person question, because everyone has a different mindset as to what financial success is. I have retired clients. They live just fine on Social Security, and they're plenty happy with things and being content with where they're at. I have clients that make several $100,000 a year, and they don't know where half of it's going.
You are really making me want to organize my life right now. That's all I'm thinking about is I got to organize and track and everything, because I haven't been doing that. I'll be honest with you.
Well, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
It really isn't, especially if you're at all good with Excel. That's it.
Easy.
It's exporting and so forth. If you're not good at Excel, is it really that tough to just print out your bank statement, just kind of add up how much you've got your utility bills? An easier way to do it is pick out your biggest expenses, and then whatever is left over is unaccounted for cash flow, kind of miscellaneous stuff, kind of the black hole of whatever you're spending money on. And then your goal would be to then, how do we manage that black hole a little bit better?
I think a reason people don't want to track or don't want to really budget is because there's shame or guilt associated with it. Like if I'm seeing how much money I'm spending on coffee, it's like, oh, come on, Nat, you could have done better, So how do you kind of work around that? Not to feel shame and guilt, but like look at it as like a learning curve.
Well, Michael Jordan, who most consider the best basketball player of our time. I know you're from the Chicago area, so Bulls.
I agree.
So he lost a lot of games though too. He missed game-winning shots. As much as he's considered the greatest basketball player of all time, he has mistakes, And I believe he looked at losing. He didn't really look at it as losing. He looked at it as a learning experience. So you've got to have the right mindset to not dwell on what just happened. You've got to use the tracking as a means of how can I do better.
Gotcha.
Or I was just on your Cato Living show, and I'm like, how can you make things less worse?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because because at the same time, it's not possible to go from 0 to 100 on all of these things. It's attuned to you've never ran before in your life to trying to run a marathon to maybe trying to walk a 5K. Make gradual steps. If your black hole is $1,000 a month, try and make it $900 a month.
Gotcha.
And if you track that month over month, you're like, hey, my black hole is a little less.
Gotcha. For someone that's listening to this right now and is like, I want to change my life, I want to change the way my finances are going, I want to be earning more than I'm spending, what is something that you could share with them?
Well, in terms of changing your, you can increase your income or reduce your expenses. It'd be great to do some of both. And I think there's ways you can accomplish both. So in terms of changing your income, thinking about ways that you can learn new skills for your job, which maybe that's taking you more time, that takes you away from some of the spending that you were doing. Think of by delivering pizzas it's like, hey, the time that I wasn't out with my friends, I was earning money. If you can find ways to improve yourself, or how many people have gym memberships that don't use them? Use your gym membership.
Yeah.
It costs the same whether you use it once or 30 times. You've got to look at your environment and put yourself in those environments where you're not, you're improving your bottom line, but maybe you're improving yourself, learning a new job skill, getting healthier, because the healthier you are, the more productive you're going to be at work. And those have really, it really has a compounding effect, because if you're increasing the top line, you could also be increasing the bottom line at the same time.
I feel like oftentimes people really associate stress with money. Do you have any advice to kind of not tie those two together?
I find a lot of stress around money comes around things that you can't control. As we talk, we've had a very tumultuous time in our financial markets the last 3 or so weeks. There were tariffs announced by our government across the world, and people's retirement savings have been in flux since then. But you can't control what those markets are going to do. And by making decisions to make drastic changes when markets are changing so fast, you're saying what the markets are going to do. And that's nearly impossible. But more importantly, right now, you're also making a bet that what Donald Trump is going to do, and that is impossible.
Gotcha.
And and it was spending. Yes, some things are in your control, some things are out of your control. Your car breaks down, you can't control that. You got medical expenses, you can't control that. So
give yourself a little grace in a sense.
Give yourself grace, because there's always so much you can control. Reflect on what happened, see how it can be different. If we look at every mistake that we ever made, and you and I, everyone's made thousands of mistakes.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're human. If you dwell on the past, you're not going to really be able to move forward.
So you're kind of saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, to not give up if you're in a bad place right now financially. There's always room for improvement. There's always a way out, in a sense. Okay. Go ahead.
One thing that I think you could do is think about your environment. Think about who you're spending your time with. Who are you trying to keep up with? I think it's stress. Some stress just comes up when you're in a certain social situation where your friends are in different places than you're at, and you're trying to keep up with them.
Yeah.
And
if they're your friends, they'd understand.
Well, but you don't want them to think, that you want them to think highly of you and so forth. And it's just, you just got to be comfortable with where you're at and be at peace. Like, hey, it's okay if I don't have the latest thing. It's okay that I don't, have the fanciest drink or whatever it is that you're trying to keep up with. And it's not, and I would say it's not the Starbucks. It's got to have the nice car. Got to have the big ticket items are where I see a lot of people really go backwards, like phones. Do you really need a new phone? Is it that much better than the last phone? I suppose there's deals, but like new cars, it's just like why buy something that's going to depreciate in value?
Yeah.
Really, the best thing to do with a car, regardless of how much money you make, drive it till it dies.
As you're saying this, I kind of had this idea. Why are we like always wanting to purchase the latest thing? Is it for other people's opinions on us, or is it for us specifically? Like,
well, think about it. Is there that much difference between a Lexus and a Toyota?
Well, one's shinier than the other, some might say, but not really.
But is it really that much better?
Point A to point B, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but the Lexus sounds a lot better when you're saying like, yeah, I just got a new Lexus versus I just got a new Toyota.
Huh.
Or like, I even think about the more affordable car makers, Kia, Hyundai. They've really improved their products, but still there's a stigma around owning a vehicle like that when the reality is point A to point B. The wealthiest person that's ever came to my office drove up in a 1990s Geo Metro that had duct tape on the windows.
Really? Huh. Because I guess he's or she's not like looking for approval from others.
Yeah.
They're confident within themselves and they know that they are wealthy and financially able to do so. So
yeah, that's when you're truly wealthy, is when you don't care what other people think.
Huh. That's fascinating.
Freedom.
Yeah. Financial freedom. Yeah. That's a big thing. I feel like money is held over people's head a lot. That's something that people wake up every morning and think, money, money, money. How do you get out of that? Is there an answer?
Stop caring what other people think.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to, because I think that's how we're gauged a lot of times. Where do we live? What kind of car do we drive? What kind of restaurants do we eat at? What kind of clothes do we wear? All those things. Again, you think about, grocery store, simple comparison. Is the generic cereal that much different than the brand name cereal? But you're like, oh, you've got two, Fruitios instead of Fruit Loops. Like,
yeah.
Like, what does that say about you as a person? It doesn't define you. It shouldn't.
Yeah. Do you believe life is easier when you're financially successful in a sense?
Complicates things a lot more. I don't think it's easier. It depends your mentality about it.
Can you expand on that?
There is I don't even know what I should say his name, a Puff Daddy. Obviously, not a great person in the, for all the crap that he pulled just recently, what we found out that he did over time. But he had a song, More Money, More Problems. More money you have, the more complicated your taxes are. The more money you have, the more other people might think of you as someone that can donate more to their charity or help them out financially. And the more, and then you accumulate more things and so forth. It really, if you don't stay in your lane, more money can make things more complicated too.
Interesting. There's a concept we had talked about with my co-host Jackson. Does money really make you happy? What causes more is that true or not? It's like the big question. Does money bring you happiness?
It depends how you approach it. Again, it comes back to staying in your lane and not letting it overwhelm you.
Gotcha.
Because if you base your self-worth off of your money, you're never going to be free. You're always going to be chasing the next thing. So
get comfortable with yourself right now at this point in time.
Yeah. Some of the most successful people that I know, they don't get caught up in money. They get caught up in the next idea. And I know some very, very entrepreneurial people in our area, and we're very blessed in our Mankato area community. We have amazing entrepreneurs and small business owners thinking of these great ideas and so forth. And if they were caught up in like, oh, I wonder how this is going to look, or that, or I need to make another $1, but they focus on that idea, the money takes care of itself.
Yeah, because greed is a scary thing. You could really fall into that trap of always
Someone's always got more. Someone's always got more.
I'd love to talk about that, because that's not the first time I've heard that. Is wealthy people, they're never like you had said, thinking about money. They're always thinking about how to get creative and how they can be in service to others. Do you feel like that's something that you've noticed?
Absolutely. But I've also seen it the other way, where, wealth is relative. If if you could have 10, I remember reading a story about a tech CEO that had a net worth of $10 million, but he's comparing himself to people from Google and Apple that had probably hundreds of millions of dollars, and he felt like he was poor. The reality is, I think I'd be okay on that. I think I could squeak by on that.
Yeah. This might be a little like kind of a different angle, but there's people that say, talk to your money. Like when you receive money, you're like, oh, where do you want to go? And they'll be like, okay, listen, have you heard about it? I think this is a book called Happy Money, if I'm not mistaken. Have you heard that before, that concept?
I have not talked to my money before.
It was like something along the lines. It was like you find a penny. Lewis Howes, he's the podcast host that discussed this. He was saying how like when you see a dollar, you ask it where it wants to go. And you'll usually hear, okay, to your investment, to your savings, to your whatever. And it'll tell you, or give this to somebody else. Do you feel like a big concept of money is giving back?
I think absolutely. That's something I've always looked at. Growing up, not having a lot of resources financially, I look at different organizations that really played a role in me getting to where I'm at, whether it's a mentor or different just different community programs that really provide support. Our schools, it's just nothing feels better than giving back. And sometimes you just have to do things because you're not expecting anything in return, and then you wind up a long time down the road where it pays you back more than you'd ever imagine.
Giving back. Well, what advice would you give to someone that wants to give back but doesn't necessarily have the funds to do so?
Boy, there's so many opportunities, and this is a great way to build connections in the community. I was one of the founders of Mankato Youth Place in the area, one of the founding board members, and just through being involved in the Mankato Youth Place, I've been on the YMCA board. I've done all sorts of stuff. You build these relationships that not only allow you to help give back to the community, that it builds relationships for you to further yourself economically, socially, so forth. I mean, but again, going into it, not expecting anything in return.
I like that.
It comes back to you full fold.
I feel like that's could be a reason why people don't necessarily give back. Is they're like, oh, I have to keep every penny because I don't want to lose anything. I can't even make ends meet. And that's kind of why.
Well, so what if let's go back to how we spend our time, and I'll use like my pizza, delivering pizzas on Friday and Saturday night analogy. What if you volunteered on Friday and Saturday nights at an organization instead of going out? Not only are you giving back, but now you're not spending money either.
A win-win.
Boom.
Awesome. Well, wow. Ryan, I have a new concept of money. I'm thinking of, volunteering and giving back. I feel like that's probably got my answers. Yeah. And let me ask you one last question that I like to ask our guests. If you could give yourself one piece of advice back when you were younger, what would that be? That
is a hard question.
Take your time.
Gosh,
I threw it at you.
The brain puzzling. I mean, I should have studied for this. Man.
It could be anything. It doesn't even necessarily have to do with finances.
Automatically, your brain goes to what's the one, like a big thing. I would say, honestly, I don't think I would have done anything differently.
Oh,
because
you're the first to say that.
The mistakes that I've made in my life have helped me grow as a person, and it's some difficult situations, and I guess that's probably I can't change things that I've done, but I can grow from them.
Love that. I just saw a quote. It said, "Your past is just a book that you read but don't live." And I was like, "Oh, that's a good."
That is good.
Well, thank you, Ryan, so much. I appreciate you kind of sharing your expertise and taking the time out of your day to sit with us. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to me ramble. Hope it made sense.
We loved
to people.
it. I learned a lot. So thank you so much.